Hey everybody, it is Malina Moye. I hope that you are doing well and staying safe. I teamed up with Gibson for Black History Month to honor our sister, the trailblazing, the fearless, the bold, the incomparable Sister Rosetta Tharpe. For me, it is so important that we educate, or I should say, re educate a lot of our audience on Sister Rosetta Tharpe simply because I've seen that there is a major disconnect. I want to say also for our future and our current artists who are also in the rock genre. So we have these incredible historians here to help set the record straight. So without further ado, the fantastic panel of folks we have is this. GAYLE WALD is a professor of English and American Studies at George Washington University. She is the author of Shout, Sister, Shout, the untold story of rock and roll trailblazer sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was awarded the National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship and served as co-editor for the Journal of Popular Music Studies. GAYLE, give us a quick hello.
Hello, so nice to be here. Hi.
Hey, thank you so much for being here. And we have Mr. Jerry Zolten. Jerry Zolten's a professor of communication of arts and sciences at Penn State University. He is the author of Great God Almighty, the Dixie Hummingbirds Celebrating the Rise of Soul Gospel Music. He also produced the film How They Got Over, Gospel Quartets and the Road to Rock and Roll. And then we have Mr. Mark Carpentieri, who is the president of MC Records. His label has been nominated for 6 Grammy Awards and over 30 Blues Music Awards. He also released the critically acclaimed compilation album, Shout, Sister, Shout, a tribute to Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And then we have the incomparable Bob Mertz. Mr. Mertz is a Philadelphia area-based audio electronics executive and community organizer who has worked with the family and, of course, the friends of Sister Rosetta Tharpe for the past decade. And the projects that he has done includes the memorial concert funding for Sister Rosetta's headstone, a campaign placing a historical marker at her Philadelphia home, and an initiative with the Philadelphia Music Alliance securing Sister Rosetta a star on the City Walk of Fame. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Bob, I think that's the place that I met you and Mark when the concert, when I had a chance to come in and honor Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Exactly, Malina. I remember that when they put the star down, you were right there. You had your own chair with your name on it.
Are you kidding? I loved it, right? Sister Rosetta was working from the grave. No.
Right. And I remember your performance that evening at the formal affair. Everybody had their black, was really electric.
Thank you. Thank you so much for thinking. I mean, like I said, what's so incredible is that since then, we've seen obviously all of you guys help to work and promote the legacy of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And in 2018, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So obviously, that was all of the work that you guys did collectively. So thank you. We all thank you for bringing her to the forefront. And since then, how about Lizzo with the Saturday Night Live performance? And of course, Celise. I know, right? Celise on guitar. And then also Kirby Jean Raymond, Pierre Moss actually did a whole collection that was inspired by her. I had a chance to actually perform for him as well, too. So it's just so cool, right? I'm like, this is amazing. And then Yola's going to play her in the new Baz Luhrmann film. So I'm just saying this is amazing because where we are right now as a country, it seems that now finally we want to make all the wrongs right. And one of the things that for me, I didn't want to start with this first, but the spirit is moving me. And I'm saying, how did we fail her as a society where it seemed in the beginning she was swept under the rug and just forgotten about? Why do you think that is so? Here's a woman who absolutely trailblazed. How is it that she absolutely was swept under the rug and did not get her due?
It's a really great question. I think I think for me, there's several answers.
Okay.
One of them has to do with, in a culture that values the new, what we tend to do with mature artists, especially mature female artists.
Yeah.
And styles change and musical tastes change. So that always has to do with the story of, kind of in artists' lives. But I do think that Rosetta Tharpe was forgotten because she could be forgotten, because the culture also gave authority and authorship over rock and roll music to other figures. So
Right.
by the time that Rosetta Tharpe passed away in 1973, she had certainly been eclipsed in popularity by other gospel performers. And during her lifetime, there were many, many other gospel performers who also, right, were excellent and amazing and that sort of thing. But I do think that the combination of being eclipsed within the field of gospel, but also being, available to be written out of a certain kind of rock legacy has a lot to do with why she was not in the books about rock and really a minor figure in the books about gospel. And so she really literally fell between the cracks.
You know what? And hearing you say this is what I think as well. For me, because I'm like a current artist now, and I also am in the world of rock. And I think that, and I don't know if I can say this, but I think that also my culture, because for some reason, my culture doesn't look at rock music as something that we have actually started. So when I look at like the Image Awards, Soul Train Awards, and I go, how come these places don't have categories like rock or country for us to submit ourselves so that we can also so we can feel included? And then that's what really made me start to go, okay, we have to educate, because you're missing the other. And Rosetta was the other. You know what I'm saying? And then I start to go, it's impossible to even erase her, because when I start to think of her music, I think gospel. But let me tell you what I really think. In gospel, growing up in church, we looked at it as is sanctified. So meaning it's a spirit, it's a feeling. So I want to ask you guys, Mark, what do you think? Like with when it comes to performing, when we're in church, people were saying that they didn't want her to take gospel, that feeling. I think that feeling, the emotion, the preaching. Yeah, think about Chuck Berry with his all that is gospel. Those are the things that we do in church. So to take that and now move that to secular in church, for us, it's like the conversation that we're having with our people, with God. It's like the closest or the purest thing that you can do. So I started to listen to a lot of her words and how she was enunciating, and obviously the guitar and the music. And I thought, it's literally impossible to say that this person is not the reason why, when I hear Queen, when he does the growl, when I hear AC/DC, the lead singer, that is church. That's church. They had to have gotten that, huh?
It's inside you. It's inside you, right? So if it's inside you, it's, like that old song, it's got to come out.
That's right.
If, for lack of a better word, I mean, Sister was certainly ebullient, always letting her her big light shine. And I think that's a really important part of her. But, in terms of the church, I think that was a situation where how she fell through the cracks. Eventually, the church didn't quite accept her as a gospel artist.
Sure.
She was part of those 1964 shows over in England where she was for a long time. But the blues people didn't quite accept her either. So she was like in the middle there.
I think a lot of things are going through my mind. And I guess one of them is forgotten, but by who? It's interesting because I think gospel, because of its nature,
that's right,
and, rooted in the church and culture, has always been kind of interestingly marginalized.
Right.
And yet it's so foundational for all the pop music forms, that grew out of it. Most people have no knowledge of the foundation that gospel, provided. I think Sister Rosetta was certainly well remembered, from the moment she hit the planet with her incredible guitar playing through the decades. I don't know that Chuck Berry went out and bought a Sister Rosetta record, or that Little Richard, was listening to her and saying, I want to do that. But I think it's a subtler thing. I think that she planted a seed, a way of performing, ebullient, as Mark said. I think that's her spirit, just made an impression that lasted for an awfully long time, even though her name might not have been known by the general public, in later years, and especially after she passed.
I was really attracted to her, probably mostly by her personality. I had seen
Right.
GAYLE on television interviewing after her book came out, and I didn't know who this person was. But in learning more about her, she just had such a positive feeling, so much energy that
Yeah.
the more I watched her videos, I was like, who is this person? Philadelphia should claim her. She needs a home. You know, she traveled around, she had an unmarked grave. So I thank GAYLE for bringing out the book. I thank Mark for the tribute CD. I thank Jerry for all his research he's done over the years in lifting her up. But for me, it was really that, you know, connection. Just basically her personality was so strong. It just drew you in.
I love that. And Gail, we jump right in, but my thing is this: for people who are not aware of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, can you give us an overview of who she is?
All right, so she was born in Cotton Plant, Arkansas in 1915. She grew up a little bit in Chicago and a lot on the road with her evangelist mother. She and her mother were part of the Church of God in Christ, a Pentecostal denomination. She trained, her training was on the road with her mother. Her first instrument was probably piano.
Okay.
But she also obviously became famous as a guitarist. Her mother played the mandolin. And what you need to know about Rosetta Tharpe is that in 1938, she left an unhappy marriage and her husband in the Miami, Florida region, and went to New York City and signed a contract with Decca Records, a major recording label at the time, and put out 4 sides, 4 singles, and had a kind of one of those miracle years where she was on all the important stages in New York City in the space of about 12 months. She was at Carnegie Hall. She was at the Savoy Ballroom. She was at the Cotton Club, which is, of course, a segregated venue, but a prestigious venue for performers. And it was from there that her career took off. And she was really the first person to popularize the sounds of the music that was emerging and then being called gospel music. There were strands of it, but she was the first person to popularize at least the sounds of the Pentecostal church. As Mark said, she spent time starting in the late 50s through the 60s in Europe. In some ways, she was a bigger attraction in Europe in that period than she was in the United States. And she died in 1973. She was working on an album when she passed away. So this was a person who literally was making music her entire life. And probably the most outrageous thing that she ever did as a performer was get married at a baseball stadium.
I was going to ask you about that. Yes.
In Washington, D.C. You got to talk about the baseball stadium.
Yeah, we have to.
In 1951, she staged her 3rd wedding to someone named Russell Morrison, who became Mr. Rosetta Tharpe. And, you know, between 15 and 25,000 people, depending on whose estimate you believe, came out to see her. But it was quite, you know, I like to think of it as the first arena rock show.
I love it. Yes.
People came out to see, not a group, but they came out to see her, and she had all of her friends and associates playing supporting roles in the wedding. She was actually married by a local preacher in DC. And I think that was the most, it was covered with a big spread in Ebony magazine with a lot of photographs. So, and she played guitar from center field in her white wedding dress. So it's hard to top that.
Like, I don't think, right. That's like next level. And then when I think about the time of when that took place, and for me as a Black woman, I go looking at my grandparents and knowing how they came up, the first thing I think is to have the audacity, to have the boldness, the fearlessness. Where does that come from when you just say, no matter what, I am going to enter this so huge. I want to do this. I want to look like this. I'm going to charge this out. I mean, I can't even, that's amazing, because to me, look at where we are right now in 2021. And for the first time, we have a woman of power in a position. It took that long to get here, and a person of color. So to go back and know where we've come from, that's unbelievable, because at a certain time, for African Americans, we weren't even allowed to read or write. You know what I mean? We got in trouble for trying to do that.
Oh, just a quick ad that the wedding was released on a vinyl record album.
Oh,
you know,
that's epic.
Sold a ton of records to boot.
I love it. So she's a businesswoman.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it makes me start to think of Prince and how people start to invent. And again, we have to pivot to get certain things that we're looking for and think outside the box to really become grandiose, flamboyant, but it worked. And here we are talking about it. Another thing I thought was interesting was the performance, the one that everyone sees in Europe, the big festival where she came in on the pony. That was amazing. Oh my God, just again, the energy and then to see the piano player, and I mean, all of it, the notes, everything. And then one of the things I took from that too is how she got off, she got the guitar, the band is playing the swing, then suddenly she's playing and she realized she wasn't in key. So she went over and said, so what keys are we in? And then she kept doing it. And I thought, this is so odd. This is iconic. This is incredible.
So, that was part of, backed up by the blues artist. I think that was Lafayette Leak on the piano, but I believe that's correct.
Man, he was so epic. It's because it made me think about James Brown. You know what I mean? About Bird and like that whole, again,
all you're missing is the other person putting the fur coat on her or taking it off. That's all you're missing.
Right. But once again, it made me go showmanship.
Yeah.
So not only are we talking about a person who's a business person, we're talking about showmanship, we're talking about the music, and we're talking about a person that's fighting a whole other fight aside of the music.
I mean, if you look at the, of course, and you look at the Les Paul she had, the white with the gold. I mean, it's so bling all over the place. I mean, that was about as, opulent a guitar you could have that no one would forget. You have that white. It's got the 3 pickups, and there you are in the fur coat, which I have right there.
Yeah, I love it.
So so it's all part of that, right? It's all part of
showmanship, the show,
showmanship, and the other thing is she delivered. It wasn't just like some people do that to cover up something else.
No,
it was even better when she played.
Man, that's how you know it was real. Like, because she said, "What key are we in?" Therefore, the band had already did it, and she just jumped right in, like, here we go. And that's when I thought, wow. And what I love, again, is it took me back to church, meaning the performance she gave was one of those performances where you go, I don't know if I'm going to be here again. This may be the last time I see you. So I'm going to leave you with everything I got. That's kind of how I took it. And that's why, to me, when I see certain artists, I always go, the ones that really, really touch you are the ones where you can feel the spirit. And that, again, takes us to, I think they also called her a sanctified rocker. And then again, you know what I mean? So then you keep going back and going, yeah, that's why when you see Aerosmith, you see Queen, you see AC/DC, you see Tina Turner, all these people, I feel, are channeling something that's bigger than themselves. And the reason we love it is because the truth is we identify with something that they're giving. And I think it's freedom and the chance to just be and be pure and be real. And you buy it because you also see yourself.
Funny thing, since I made this film, I've had a reaction many times from viewers who've seen black and white clips of Sister Rosetta singing, late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they say, oh wow, what an incredible performer. I mean, she's just like Jimi Hendrix, Pete Townsend, Eric Clapton, and many more. To which I say, no, please, you've got it the wrong way round. They sound like her. I mean, remember, she was singing before they were born. She was singing way before they were born. And it was the music that was being heard on the radio, in live performance, on disc, that was being hugely influential to young musicians growing up in America like Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, and black guys too, of course, Chuck Berry, Little Richard. That was the influence she was having back in those days that came through to musicians, particularly in Britain, but all across the world, that you can still hear today. That fantastic swaggering guitar style and that wonderful voice, that real attack, that warmth, that humanity that makes her the godmother of rock and roll.
Let me just add this observation. Our film, How They Got Over, features a clip of Sister Rosetta on a syndicated television show that was seen all over the country weekly. And it is the one scene that gets the biggest rise out of the crowds when we show the film. And Sister Rosetta is not just standing there politely playing the guitar. She's getting down and playing those slide licks. You can see the camera move right up on her hands. I can't say for sure, but I bet Chuck Berry saw that clip on TV.
Some of the licks.
Who knows, you know? But it's all there. It's all there.
And the licks too.
What we're dancing around is the idea that, right, how extraordinary and unusual and important it was that she was a woman who played the electric guitar. That was her instrument, and that was her mode of communication, and that was her way of feeling the spirit. It was her guitar spoke. And in that sense, I think, in that sense, she was setting a blueprint for a lot of, kind of like what Mark was saying earlier, or even Jerry, what you were saying about, like, it's not necessarily, we don't need to know that Chuck Berry said, I saw that, to know that the blueprint was in the air. And the idea of letting the guitar speak, it's so quintessential to rock and roll. It's so important to it. And obviously you had to have an electric instrument to do it. And she was extraordinary for taking up the electric instrument. And as Mark said, staying state of the art. You all know more about those instruments than I do, but, picking a state of the art instrument. So she was no shrinking violet with her guitar. I
love that. I was going to ask you is, why do you think she chose Gibson?
When she went from the L5, which is the acoustic guitar, she went to solid bodies, which of course is a huge leap. And as you know, the next guitar that she was really noted with was the 53 Les Paul. Now it had those, you go from an L5 to a Gibson solid body Les Paul, she's not kidding. She is ready to get sustained. She's ready to go. And you're really talking about, first, there's not a lot of solid body guitars at that point. So I guess she wanted to be heard. She goes back to playing solid body. I think she first starts around 47. But at that time, when you get to about 1950, 51, you had the Fender, you had the Gibson, and the Gibson, for whatever reason, that was maybe because she played the L5, but that's a very, very powerful guitar, heavy guitar, 9 pounds. And that is gonna ring the bell. That is not that is not sitting on the corner. This is right in front, distortion, rock and roll.
Right. Some of the early quartet groups that brought electric in after Sister Rosetta inspired them made the point they had all been a cappella. And bringing in an electric guitar was really tough because it was front and center. You couldn't avoid it. For Sister Rosetta to choose just one woman, one guitar solo, that was, again, incredibly audacious for the time. There was no precedent. Nobody else, there was T-Bone Walker maybe and Charlie Christian before that. But to stand there the way Sister Rosetta did, I think that was the first time, and certainly in the world of gospel, that anybody had seen anything like that. And it was a magnet, I want to do that. Howard Carroll of the Dixie Hummingbirds wanted to do that.
And being able to play the guitar as a soloist was so important for her freedom because she didn't rely on, she had various backing groups and bands and collaborators, but because she had a mobile instrument, her instrument wasn't the piano, she had a kind of freedom and ability to kind of be the star attraction. She was never fronting. She was briefly when she was a young performer fronting a swing band fairly unhappily, but that was never the position she wanted to occupy, where she was just the girl singer to be looked at. She wanted to command all that authority. And so I think being a soloist, whether she planned that out, consciously or not, gave her a kind of freedom that most women didn't have.
And then also, I guess she was one of the first people to have a tour bus. Can you imagine, like, just as an artist, for me, I'm like, just breaking all kind of boundaries, stereotypes, just everything that would make me want to say, that's what I want to do. because again, the joy that she also had in her performing, and then what people got from it.
I feel like can't understate how important Rosetta Tharpe was as an example for the British invasion artists. But my guess is that for most British audiences, the distinctions among what we think of as those distinct forms, those distinct kind of Black cultural expressions, that those distinctions were lost, but that British audiences felt like they were seeing something authentic. They didn't get to see Black cultural heroes very often live. It was a time when that was becoming more common. So the excitement about being able to see this stuff and be able to see music that was, you know, so outside of what they had available, let's say through like BBC, right? This was a culture where, you know, the guardrails on what you could listen to on the radio were more extreme than they were in the United States. So I think for a lot of young people, it was super exciting.
He was also, Malina, over there in the late 1950s with Chris Barber in 57. And he was one of the founders of what was called skiffle music, John Lennon's band, the Quarrymen. I read online, Rosetta played at the Cavern Club in Liverpool in 58 on a Wednesday. John Lennon played there on a Friday. And then the whole skiffle scene kind of morphed, you know, down the road into the British rock, and then to the 64 and the later tours that Rosetta did. So she was there from the late 50s on. And Chris Barber was very influential over there as far as really the advent of kind of the British invasion.
And now I had the chance to sit down with someone who knew Sister Rosetta Tharpe personally, Mr. IRA Tucker Jr. He's carrying on the 90-year tradition of the legendary gospel quartet group, the Dixie Hummingbirds. His family was close friends with Sister Rosetta, helping to establish Philadelphia as the gospel music capital of the world in the 1940s and 50s. Ira is also the former longtime publicist, of one of my favorite people as well, Mr. Stevie Wonder. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing Sister Rosetta's story. Tell us something about Sister Rosetta that none of us would know.
She was a competitive fisherman.
I love it.
She used to fish, and she loved fishing. Fishing to her was like therapy.
Wow.
She enjoyed it, and she was very competitive. She could outfish most men. I mean, for real. And if she didn't get more than anyone, she wasn't happy. So she was a very competitive woman, and always laughing, always had a lot of joy around Sister. We called her Aunt Sis, and she called me little brother. Everybody you were either little brother or miss.
Amen. Yeah.
That was it.
I love that.
So she didn't have to remember any names.
You know what? I never thought of that.
She was just a fun-loving person. And to us, she was more like Lena Horne, or she was a star. I mean, we saw her in a light that we were very fortunate to be that close to someone who had that type of cachet.
I had read somewhere that she was like the first person, they said, to ever have a tour bus. Amen.
Now, at the time, a lot of stuff was going down on the road. You know, I mean, a lot of racial stuff. People were flattening tires, and a lot of stuff was going on that you had to be very careful. Yeah. So she decided that the best thing for her was to have something that everyone could fit in and they could all be together. So she ended up working it out with this manager at the time, and they got this Greyhound bus, the old Greyhound bus they were going to take apart, and they, had it fixed up. And that way everyone could sleep, because she took out the seats, some of the seats in the back, so everybody could sleep on the bus, and you could eat on the bus. And sometimes they would also take the opening act with them on the bus.
Wow.
So that ended up being a very good thing for her. The next person that I knew the next bus that I saw other than hers was James Brown. When he had a bus, it was James Brown and the Famous Flames on the side of their bus. So tour buses then came into fashion, but she was the leader. She was the first one to have, and I'm sure the first female ever to go into that. That's the one thing I loved about her, is she had chutzpah. I mean, she really had confidence. Amen. She would step out there, and it didn't matter, if she felt it, she would step out and she would go for it.
For me, like I said, one of the things is I just really want to educate people and for my audience and for my culture as well, to understand that we 100% are trailblazers for rock and roll. And you can look at it from fashion, from being dynamic, from showmanship, from being business, from being the guitar player, from being the other. And it's important that you embrace it, because you're missing out on all the great talent by making us feel that we are supposed to just stay in one particular lane. And like I said, notes know nothing. All they know is they exist. And it all depends on the story that you want to tell. That's so for me, Gayle, what would you say Rosetta will want her legacy to be?
Oh my God, I think the fact that there are young people who are inspired by her, that, Lizzo and Janelle Monáe have public conversations about her.
Yes.
That's meaningful. That Brittany Howard, has, first of all, I think there's Black women are like kind of sustaining the tradition of rock and roll, and we're going to see more of it. That rock, it's interesting. I feel like rock is turning into a genre that is dominated by women, and we're going to see more, and a lot of women of color, and we're going to see more and more interesting stuff, hopefully in the 21st century. But I think she'd be happy about this. And I'm really happy to see young people appropriate her for their own needs. Amen. So, there's this meme now, queer Black woman invented rock and roll. Pierre Moss uses that. Lizzo uses that. That's, to me, that's young people, that's queer people, young Black queer people saying, rock and roll doesn't even, the story about rock and roll doesn't necessarily matter to them, who came first. Like that's a kind of silly game to play. But by saying a queer Black woman invented rock and roll, they're claiming Rosetta Tharpe for their own needs right now. Wonderful. And that's making space for themselves. And I think she'd want that, like make space with me.
So I'm hoping, Rosetta's legacy will motivate young people to pick up instruments, form bands, and especially young women pick up the guitar.
How about you, Jerry?
Not to be a crass commercial plug, but for the second edition of my Dixie Hummingbirds book, which is coming out soon, I wrote a new chapter on legacy. And, I asked, how do you measure legacy exactly? And I found, this music crossed cultures. It overflowed its cultural boundaries and has had profound impact. It's hard to measure that. Who knows how many cases out there who are going to carry the seed of Sister Rosetta forward in the music that they make. It's amazing.
One of the most important things that I feel is to be true to yourself, do your research, and also be inspired and challenge the industry, challenge people, challenge the music, and color outside the box. Because if you do that, you will start to see a whole other world that you never imagined. I hope that this has encouraged you to continue to look for more information about Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Hit Google, of course, get the books, get Gayle's book. I love this book. It was wonderful. And also look online, look at old footage. This is like how you actually start to create and learn and find something that inspires you from that and start to just go. And I leave you with what my mom and dad always said to me, Malina, when you don't see yourself represented, show up. When you think you can't, show up, and always know you matter and you count. So with that, thank you guys so much for joining in today. And thank you, Gibson.
Amen.
Thank you, man. Thank you guys. God bless you guys. And thank you so much for carrying on the torch for Sister Rosetta Tharpe. This is wonderful. And I can only wait to see what the next 20 or 30 years holds. Sky's the limit.
Thank you, Malina.
Thank you, Malina.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you all.